to Bookwrights House, where we explore stories that bring imagination, history, and human strength to life. Today's feature takes us into the landscapes of the American frontier with Ryder Mann, Arizona Ranger, a gripping Western adventure by James Domenighini, known for his background in science fiction and history storytelling. Domenighini now turns his focus to the deserts and border towns of Arizona, crafting a narrative rich in grit, honor, and moral complexity. Inspired by classics like Star Trek, Lost in Space, and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Domenighini brings his signature character-driven storytelling into the Western genre. The result in a story that blends thrilling frontier action with deep reflection, one that feels both timeless and relevant. Mr. Domenighini, welcome to Bookwrights House. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Okay, so for the first question, let's delve into the transition of genres. So you've spent a significant amount of time writing in science fiction and history, including works like Chaos Company and its continuation, Chaos Allies. So what was the spark that finally drew you into the world of the 19th century Arizona frontier?
Well, I grew up watching Westerns with my father, and I wasn't sure I wanted to write a Western or not. But as I was working on my third science fiction novel, I realized that there was a lot in common. It's just storytelling. And so as I have to build the story for a science fiction novel, you have to do the research and build a story for a Western. My first try at writing it, I realized after about 10 chapters that it was no good because it sounded like it was a cartoon. And so I threw that all out and started doing some more serious exploration, looking into the history of the period and everything that was going on. And then I started writing it again. And one of the things that was very helpful to me, music is very helpful to me. When I was writing this whole novel, I listened to the soundtrack from a 1950s Western entitled High Noon, about a sheriff who is about to be murdered by these outlaws returning from prison, and nobody in the town wants to help him defend his life. So it's a very beautiful piece of music, and it helped me figure that out to prepare for it. But what happened was, for the first chapter, which introduces a lot of different items, elements to it at best, I had heard a song by Johnny Cash entitled Hung My Head. And it inspired me to write this introduction with the hero's younger brother going out one morning to hunt a coyote that's been stealing chickens from their ranch, attacking the chicken coop. And by mistake, he kills somebody. Or he thinks he does anyways. And so that leads into, then we jump forward to my hero, who had left his fiancée at the altar so he could run off and join Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders and go to fight in the Spanish-American War in 1898. So when he eventually comes back, his fiancée has given birth to their child who had died during that time, and the whole town hates him. Even his own family hates him. Mm-hmm. And so while everybody else is welcomed in back to the United States as heroes, his own family and his own town treat him like a monster, and they kick him out. So he wanders around for a while until an Arizona Ranger finds him and asks him if he would like to join him, because of his history, having fought in the Spanish-American War and run up San Juan Hill. He's used to that. So he's used to violence. So that becomes the story. Moves on. There's a scene with his best friend who had also who he met in the Rough Riders and had survived the attack on San Juan Hill. And his best friend went off to explore the Pacific. He goes to Australia, he goes to Hawaii, he goes to China, and then he comes back home. So that's pretty much it. In those few pages, I put together what had happened and what his personal tragedy is that he's lost a child he never knew he had, and everybody kicked him out. So for several years he was wandering around, and the Arizona Rangers are patterned after the Texas Rangers. They really existed. In early 1900s, there were still many places that hadn't become states. For instance, Oklahoma didn't become a state until 1906, and Arizona and New Mexico didn't become states until 1912. And what was keeping them from becoming states was that it wasn't just the violence, it was that people weren't moving in because it was so violent. So my hero's only used to bringing back people, bad guys, dead or alive, and he's meeting his friend in this town in eastern Arizona, because his friend has gotten word that a serial killer is coming that way to rob the bank, and so the two of them stop the serial killer. And so what else do you want me to tell you? I don't want to give away the whole story.
Oh, actually, that's quite great for that. And I already had a glimpse of the story that you wrote. So, yeah, that's really good. Okay. Do you want us to jump to another question?
Sure.
Okay. So, your science fiction background often involves expansive world building and high stakes conflict. So, did those elements influence how you approach the Wild West setting in Ryder Mann, Arizona Ranger?
Well, actually, I approached it from a smaller angle. You know, that we already have the history of these places and what happened and things like that. But it's not so much about the history as the individual. And that's how I feel. All my stories are wrapped around the individuals in them. You know, the characters, that's important. So here I have a character that went off, became a hero, comes back, and nobody wants him around. And so he wanders the West until Arizona Ranger finds him and asks him if he's wanted by anybody, and he says, nobody wants me at all. And then the man feels that once he finds out that my hero, that Ryder, had fought in Rough Riders and warfare, he wants him to join the Arizona Rangers. Now, the territory of Arizona only had enough money to have 26 Rangers, and they had to pay for almost everything. They didn't really get any money per se. They had to pay for their bullets, they had to pay for their food, they had to pay for their guns, all of this stuff. That's all true. Arizona was doing it with very little money. And after they became a state, the Arizona Rangers were dissolved. But this is early in the process and for them. And Ryder has to, the story is, the two main themes in this story is the quality of mercy and what's the best way to put it? Well, overcoming your past is the best way. He's looking for redemption. He doesn't realize he's looking for redemption, but eventually he does. And he's also trying to find who really killed the man that his brother was accused of. And I'm not going to destroy any of the story about telling you too much about that. But when he returns home, his mother comes out of the house and slaps him, keeps hitting him because he was gone so long. And, and that his brother had gone to jail. And so his father tells him to go back into town and find a place to stay. And he goes to some Hispanic people who are good friends of his, who he had grown up with their sons, but unfortunately, all of their sons had one way or another ran astray of the law and were dead. But they loved him because he had loved their sons and they had all grown up together. They loved him just like he was their son, and they take care of him. And so he starts going around town trying to figure out what happened and why it happened. And he's not finding anything, really. Again, I don't want to go on. I want you to ask me another question.
Okay. So since we're already on the topic, Ryder is portrayed as a man navigating deep moral struggles, as you stated. So how did you balance his grit with his emotional depth to ensure he felt like a fully realized character rather than a traditional Western archetype?
I gave him, he starts to question his role as a Arizona Ranger. It's his job to hunt down people, bad guys, and either bring them back dead or alive. And he doesn't feel that there's any mercy in there. And he starts, having grown up going to church and learning about mercy, he feels that he really that mercy has to play in there somewhere with all that violence. It doesn't have to be violence all the time. There should be good things. And so he finds that's what he's researching. And his friend that he had joined in stopping that man from killing all people left and right while he's robbing a bank. His friend they both fought on San Juan Hill, and they were best friends, and so they journeyed together to his hometown, and then his friend has to move on because he's a deputy U.S. Marshal. And by the way, that's how you pronounce it. In a TV series, Gunsmoke, that was on for 20-some years or so, the hero was always a U.S. Marshal, but in fact, the U.S. Marshal is from the Old West all the way to now. U.S. Marshal is the man that runs the Marshal Service, and everybody else is a deputy U.S. Marshal. That's what it was then, too. And so he and his friend have some wonderful conversations, and then his friend has to move on, and he has to go in there and find out what's going on. And then he meets up with the pastor of the church that he had known to try to find out what happened to his brother. And he meets up with the pastor's young daughter, who's 18 years old, and he really likes her, but he can't bring himself to commit to anything to her so quickly because he's so torn up about the death of his brother, and he wants the facts, and he doesn't want people saying, "Well, this is what I blew it. I told you some of the story, and I shouldn't have said that." But that's what happens. His brother at 13 is hanged for murder. And in the Old West, they even hanged children as young as 8 for murder. We've advanced a long way.
Yeah.
We don't hang little kids for murder and then find out later on they weren't the one that did it, or something like that. So yeah, I looked into that too. I had to find out if that really happened, and I found out it happened more frequently than you would want to know.
Okay. So, you've described Ryder's journey as both exciting and timeless. So, what modern day parallels do you hope readers will recognize in his struggles?
I would hope they look at how the law works and look at the desire for mercy. It's not that simple for me to explain because I don't want to tell too much of the story, but I do want people to know that the struggle is there is between mercy and his feeling of guilt because he chose to go off and fight in war for whatever reason, and he comes back and he never married his fiancée. She hates him now, and their little daughter died after only a few months, and that's something else. And he's got all this weight of guilt on him, and he doesn't know what to do with it, because everybody else, like I said, everybody else who came back from the Spanish-American War that were Rough Riders, as they were called, came back as heroes, and he's the only one that wasn't treated as a hero. So that's shock for him. And it's no longer about being a hero. It's about knowing the truth, what really happened and why. And as he goes along there, he starts meeting people that he feels he needs to understand where mercy sits in there. Because he doesn't feel that it should be, if that person doesn't want to come with you, kill them, and then find out later on that they weren't guilty and stuff like that. And that's something we have in this world today. We don't really have enough mercy among each other. And that's something important.
Okay, so now let's talk about the setting of the story. So the Arizona desert feels like more than just a backdrop. So it becomes a force that challenges and shapes the story. How did you use the environment to test Ryder's resilience?
Well, after he'd come home, he went from one bad job to another until his last job was cleaning out spittoons. Nasty job. And after that, he just rides out. He's in New Mexico that time. He rides into northern Arizona, and he just finds a nice little wooded place for his horse, and he just waits to die. And that's when that Arizona Ranger meets him and convinces him to join up there. And so I think he's tired of just hunting people down and killing them. Though the man that was later on in that town that tries to rob the bank, he's a person that likes to kill people, especially women and children. And that seems to be a common theme even today. So he doesn't want that in his life. He wants to figure that out. And in Arizona, it's a wonderful state. You know, you have in the southern part of it, you have a lot of desert, and in the western part of it. But in the north, you have these mountains, and the Grand Canyon rolls through these mountains. So there's a lot of beautiful areas there. And interestingly enough, there's these 7 canyons in eastern Arizona that are on the Comanche Reservation, which is a huge not the Comanche, pardon me, it's the Navajo. I don't know why I said Comanche. It's the Navajo Reservation. And historically, they would spend their summers in this canyon because 7 streams would roll through that canyon, and it would be nice and moist and stuff, even though the whole of the rest of Arizona was burning hot. And they used to have peach trees planted there. They lived on these peach trees. They had something like 10,000 peach trees growing in there. So that just tells you that Arizona isn't all desert, just like New Mexico is not all desert. They have mountains with beautiful trees and meadows and stuff like that. And so this is something he remembers, and he doesn't want to. I can't really give that away. You need to read it, because if I give away the whole thing, people say, "Well, I don't need to read that book now."
I already know how the story goes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the moral compass. Let's talk about the moral compass. While many Western present clear lines between right and wrong, your story leans into moral complexity. Why was it important for you to explore the gray areas within a lawman's choices?
Well, for one thing, I needed the conflict in the story. You have to have conflict all the way through if you want it to be a good story, and you want the people who are reading it to hold on to it all the time. And for another thing, if it was me, I would want to know how this happened, and I wouldn't like to know the truth. And he has this background, all this guilt that he feels, And he's still in love with his fiancée that he never married all the years later, and she doesn't want him. And so he feels a whole mixture of emotions here. And he's trying to make peace with them and understand them. When he's living with the Hispanic couple, the mother of the wife says that he would wish he would stop wearing his pistol all the time. So he leaves it behind. And he gets ambushed by the brothers of the woman that he was going to marry. They beat him up because he doesn't have any way to defend himself, until a deputy comes along and tells them to stop it or they're going to all end up in jail. And one time when he's in the bathtub and upstairs, by then some of the towns did have running water, but electrification was a long ways away. To tell you the truth, the county that I lived in, I moved to another city now. The county that I lived in didn't get electricity in it until 1958. And that was a major town. So he's in the tub, and the father comes in and he's talking to him about how one of his sons was murdered accidentally by a lawman in a gunfight with the bad guys, and another son was murdered just for pleasure by some cowboys or something like that. I don't really remember that part exactly. And the third son became a bad guy, and he was shot down. And my hero Ryder, he doesn't tell the father that he was one of the Arizona Rangers that went after the group that his last son was in, and that he may have killed him unintentionally. So he can't tell him that. So he's sitting in this bathtub, and the father is talking to him, and he says something, and Ryder reaches over the tub for his pistol, but he doesn't have his pistol. And the father points out, it's almost like a sickness that you have to turn to violence instead of just being a regular person. So it's the things that he's dealing with. He went off to war. Almost everybody who goes off to war comes back with some horrible memories. And I imagine in those days, fighting for your life while you're trying to uphold the law, it's pretty terrifying too. More so than today, because you don't have too many people around you in those days, and it's a big wide area. So it's just, I don't really know how to explain it. I just look at it and I feel that this needs more than just to be a story about gunfights and people being murdered for crimes even as young as 13. I wanted it to be more, so I just put more into it. I put humanity into it.
So, do you see Ryder Mann, Arizona Ranger as a standalone story, or is this the beginning of a larger series following Ryder's journey?
Well, it's going to have to be, because one of my brother-in-laws likes the book so much that almost every week he calls me and says, "Are you going to write a sequel to Ryder Mann?" So I'm working on a science fiction novel right now, and when I get done with it, Ryder Man 2 it's not going to be called Ryder Man 2. Okay. But the sequel will be, I'll start on that, because I've had ideas about it ever since I finished the first book. But I had other stories I wanted to tell.
Okay, that's good to hear. So, if readers take away one lesson about courage, justice, or personal strength from this book, what would you want it to be?
To look for the mercy in it first. Look for mercy with others. I have a friend who's a lawyer. He's trying to retire. All the things that he's seen in the world have upset him so much that half the time when we get together, all he can do is just yell at how horrible the world is. and yet he has a beautiful wife and a beautiful daughter, and he's a and he's just a really good person. He's always been that way, and he performs in an orchestra. He has a woodwind that he plays, and all of that, all that joy, and he's letting all this bad stuff that he's experienced as a lawyer creep back in, and I'm trying to help him to just let go of that. That he has access to friends. He goes to a good church. He believes in God. He believes in mercy, but he's letting all that horrible stuff affect him. And basically, that's what happens to soldiers too, and lawmen. You go through that, and you have that syndrome that they get, where they can't forget the bad memories, and they have things that happen that are discomforting to them. And the only way you can help those people is to treat them with humanity. And that's one of the things I would want you to look for in my story, is humanity and mercy. And mercy is a quality of humanity. It's not just the human race. It's a quality of choice of whether you want to be good or bad. And there are plenty of people that think of themselves as bad that are not really bad at all, that they've made bad choices, and they can still climb out of it. One of my nephews spent some time in prison. The crime he was sent away for, he didn't commit, in my opinion, because he was arrested. He was unconscious from being drugged at a beer party, and they arrested him, and they decided all the evidence pointed to him, and they sent him away. And that particular nephew is half Native American and half black. And my personal opinion is they sent him away because they only saw the racist. They didn't see the human being. He's come back a better man, but you don't always come back from prison a better man. He spent his whole time in prison reading the Bible over and over again. And people who wanted to attack, people who wanted him on their side against somebody else's side and stuff, they gave him, because he was reading the Bible, they protected him and didn't ask him to join their gangs. And so that's a miracle in itself there. They found humanity in themselves to have this guy, this nephew, continue with his reading the Bible. And many of them who were, as he described, very dangerous characters, would ask him to pray for them. And you don't really find that too much sometimes. And it's a wonderful thing that he survived all that. He lost a few teeth, and people that starting fights with he didn't want to be part of, but he's come out as a really great man. And I want anybody who's reading my story to look for the goodness in the characters and the fact that you can change. It's fiction, yes, but if it inspires you to change, to be better, then that's the best thing for reading that book. There's so many Westerns out there that are, and by the way, technically this wouldn't be called a Western, because in the book industry, a Western is from 1865 to 1890, and this is 1903. But even so, most people think of it as a Western because it's in the Old West. And I just want people to enjoy it, and I want them to find questions like this where you want to know why to do this and how you can be better and whatever it is you need to do. So much of what happens in our country or our world is hate first, and then horrible feelings afterwards for whatever you did. And I just want that to be, I want them to be entertained, and I want them to find a better path. And I'm trying not to be preachy in it. That's the important thing. it doesn't work when you have a story where you're being preachy about it instead of just presenting the characters. I believe in good characters, but I also believe that there are bad characters out there, and you have to put them in stories just for the conflict. My best example for a story with conflict is a movie from the 1957. It's a submarine movie. It's called Run Silent, Run Deep. It's the only thing it has in common with the book that has the same title is the title. But from the very first minute of it all the way to the ending, it's filled with conflict. And it's just incredible. The people change, they become friends when they hated each other, but it's still all that conflict, which if you can do that, John Grisham does that in his books. He wrote lots of mysteries and stuff, and they're solid with conflict all the way through. It's a page, what you would call a page turner. So that's what I'm trying to do to make a good page turner.
It was beautifully said. I really like how you put that.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
You're welcome. So, Mr. Domenighini, thank you for sharing your insights and the story behind Ryder Mann, Arizona Ranger. Your work reminds us that whether set in the distant galaxies or the dusty trails of the American frontier, the most powerful stories are those rooted in human experience. And to everyone joining us at Bookwrights House, thank you for being part of this journey. May today's conversation inspire you to explore new worlds, whether among the stars or across the pages of a great book. Until next time, keep reading, keep reflecting, and keep discovering the stories that shape who we are.